All right, today we're going to talk about ratios. You've copied in your vocabulary word ratio, part-to-part comparison, part-to-whole comparison, and equivalent ratios. So we're going to talk about those things and what they look like. Now, ratios are a multiplicative comparison of two quantities expressed with the same units. Now, that kind of sounds like a bunch of mumble-jumble. So, to kind of bring it down, basically what we're talking about is we're comparing two quantities, two numbers, and they have the same units. So in my picture right here, I have shapes. So my units are shapes. All right, I have squares and I have circles. So I can write a ratio that compares the parts of these the different shapes or the part to whole. For part-to-part comparison, I could say the number of squares, the ratio of squares to circles. So if I'm talking about squares to circles, I would say that that's 4 to 1, because there's 4 squares for every one circle. I can also write this as 4:1 or 4/1. Those are the 3 different ways to write ratios. We might also talk about the ratios of circles to squares. So that would be 1 to 4, 1:4, or 1/4. Now the multiplicative part of this kind of comes into play here. If I wanted to ask what's a rule we could use to find the number of squares when I know the number of circles. So if I know that there's 5 circles, that looks funny, 5 circles, then all I need to do, I know that there's 4 squares for every one circle, so I would multiply by 4 to figure out there would be 20 squares. If I said that there were 8 squares, well, I know that there's only 1 circle for every 4 squares, so that means I would need to divide by 4 to figure out that there would be 2 circles. All right, now the part to whole, that would be me comparing maybe squares to all the shapes. All right, so there's 4 squares to 5 shapes total. It's all of them together. We can write that 4:5 or 4/5. If we did the circles compared to all the shapes, that would be a 1 to 5, 1:5, or 1/5. So that's the difference between part to part and part to whole. Now, equivalent ratios are ratios that name the same comparison, but you're either multiplying or dividing both the terms by the same number. So we know that this squares to circles is 4/1, 4 to 1. So an equivalent ratio, I could multiply by 2. And an equivalent ratio would be 8 squares for every 2 circles, 8 to 2. I could even take our 4 to 1, I could multiply it by 3. And an equivalent ratio would be 12 to 3, 12 squares to 3 circles, 8 squares to 2 circles. All right, so that's how you would find an equivalent ratio.